Man, are y'all ready to dive in today?
Yeah.
Well, whether you're ready or not, we're going to. Hey, I told you we're in week 2 of Sacred Cows, and if you weren't here, you'll understand what that means a little bit as we move forward, but I want to kind of intro the same way I did last week. Last year, in September of 2019, Venture turned 7 years old, and I was struggling a little bit with who we were as a church. And so I began praying, and I had church leaders from all across Texas and outside of Texas, friends of mine around the country, praying that God would give us vision and direction for the remainder of our life. Like I felt like 7 years, like we were just like figuring it out. And God needed to reveal something new, or he didn't need to, or maybe he had already revealed something to us, and we just needed to open our stinking eyes and see it, you know? And in that time, God revealed something simple to me, and that was this: the gospel of grace. And I told you last week that Venture is a gospel of grace church, and I hope that will make more sense to you as we go through this series. But what it means is that we operate under the mindset that what Jesus did on the cross was enough. And when he said that it is finished, he meant it is finished. Like, not that his job was finished, but that everything was finished. And when we say yes to him, we get to live in that finished work. And we get to be, I say it this way, like he died for us and as us. So when he rose, we rose. And when we say yes to him, we get to speak and live in that newness, in that finished work. Kind of like what I said earlier, like we don't believe that you have to get good to get God. We believe that when we get God, through our maturing and our identity in him, we are good. Okay? So with that, a new covenant requires a new language, and that's what this series is really about. And today we're going to talk about the language of unbearable pressure. Say unbearable pressure.
Unbearable pressure.
And for 6 weeks, starting last week, we're going to kill a sacred cow. And basically what a sacred cow is a mindset that is incorrect. That the church, and probably many of you, I know I have taken it as that's correct, that must be true, it appears to be in the Bible, blah, 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 and this is what I hang my hat on. But we're going to kill some of those things, because some of those things they're just not true. They don't really align with what Jesus did on the cross. And I was feeling the same way as this question that was posed to me, and that was, what makes me think that I'm qualified to make the judgment on what constitutes a sacred cow? I was feeling the same way. When I was writing these down, I'd be like, I don't want to be that guy, like, you're wrong. That's not me. And so I had to ask myself, what makes me think that I'm qualified to say this is a sacred cow, this is not a sacred cow? And we can't cover all the sacred cows because we've only got 6 weeks, but I chose these 6. And I guess my main qualification is that I taught all of these things myself. So, like, before I began to experience this radical gospel shift, I taught all these things myself. I believed all these things were true. And as God began to renew my mind and open my eyes to what he really did on the cross, I began to see that doesn't align with what he did. Plus, I counseled with pastors who were much more smarter than me. And I asked them, I said, does this make sense? They said yes. And they had much more experience than myself. And so what makes me qualified? I don't know that I am qualified, but I can say that, you know, I did talk to people outside of Curtis Ribble, and I have taught all these traditions myself, and I'm just looking at them thinking, maybe we need to rethink some of these traditions, some of these thinking, some of these mindsets that I've taught passionately before, and start looking at what God really says. Because I do believe that the overwhelming majority of pastors and Christians are not bad people, okay? Like, nobody's a bad person. Like they're sincere believers who love God, love his scriptures, love the church. So don't think that I'm trying to speak poorly of anyone if they teach different than me. Different strokes for different folks. You know, we don't have to see eye to eye to lock arm in arm. Right. We can be unified without, you know, agreeing on everything. I know, like, if you look at Facebook or you watch, you know, CNN or Fox News, that might not be what you believe, but it is true. We don't have to agree on everything. Because I'm not trying to speak poorly of anybody. It's the farthest thing from the truth. But the goal of this series is that we all get our hearts and minds aligned. That our good intentions meet a good news message. And I've taught, like, oh my goodness, guys. If you could have been at VCC year 1, I remember the first sermon I taught. And I ain't going to tell you what it was. We burned the tapes. Because I look back and I'm like, what the what? What does that even mean, Curtis? Like, where'd you find that? It's like I took 700 Christian bumper stickers and turned them into a sermon. Like, it was so messed up. And I was like, so hear me, like, I have been so wrong about so much that I don't have any rocks to throw. There are no rocks in my pocket. That's not what this is about. This is about my concern and love for this church and the church as a whole to speak plainly and clearly about the gospel. And I believe that that gospel grows and advances individuals and families. I believe that it is for everyone, every day and everywhere. Amen. So this is going to challenge you. It has challenged me preparing every single week. So we're going to talk about some things today. Like, if you're a longtime church person, this sort of teaching, there's that like Graham high school education coming out right there. That teaching, if you're a longtime church-going Christian, you know, this type of series will probably challenge you more than most. But if you're just diving into Jesus, what this does is it defines your walk with him. So a new covenant requires a new language, and I say that all the time because words mean something, and when the ideas are put into words, and no matter how passionately they are spoken, if they reinforce erroneous notions of the gospel, then we ought to talk about it. We ought to set through and challenge that. Because too much is at risk for it to be faulty. Especially when John 8:32 says it's the truth that we know that sets us free. Right? So, my desire is that all of us would embrace and express the pure grace of God. Say pure grace. Pure grace. What pure grace does is it points us to him and not us. Okay, pure grace declares that whatever good may come to us, it's all because of him. And it has nothing to do with us. Pure grace gives him all the credit and gives us no credit. So when people say, you know, why is this going so well? All I got to say is, God. I don't got to know. It's easy. My answer is easy. Man, I was talking to my buddy the other day in Fort Stockton, Texas. Who's been to Fort Stockton, Texas? There ain't nothing in Fort Stockton, Texas but Grace Point Church, okay? I was talking to him, and he says, people call me all the time, like, how are you making this church explode? And he said, it ain't nothing. He said, it isn't a strategy. It isn't a plan. The only thing we do is we say we're going to love. And we love people better because God is love. And he said, the answer to your question is Jesus. And I believe it. He's like, it's not something I can write down, or if I did, it would be a very short book. It would be Jesus. So, here we go. Let's dive into this. What sacred cow are you killing today, Curtis? I'm glad you asked. We're going to put this cow down. Okay, here it is. God won't put more on you than you can bear. I think perhaps nothing, no statement has been said with greater heartfelt sincerity from friends comforting others than that. Or maybe it's like God won't give you more than you can handle, so on and so forth. It's one of those things that seems to be like self-evident in Scripture, or, it sounds good, like he is a loving father, so, it makes sense, right? Why would a loving father put more on you than you can bear? And I think some Christians would even argue, like, the Bible teaches this. What are you talking about? Well, the Bible kind of sort of does, but doesn't. It really doesn't, okay? Let's just establish that. Because the passage that most people lean on, that is 1 Corinthians 10:13, and it says this, no temptation has overtaken you, but such as is common to man, and God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will provide the way of escape also, so that you will be able to endure it. I love this passage of Scripture, but it does not tell me that God will not give me more than I can bear. What it tells me is that no temptation will overcome me. There's a big difference there. I love this passage because it means that no temptation will overcome me. I will never be overcome by temptation because God provides an escape. God provides a way out. I don't have the excuse. I don't get to say, sorry, God, it's too much for me. Because he provides the escape. God makes a way to escape temptation. But that's not what we're addressing. We're addressing the idea that God won't allow us to have burdens beyond our ability to endure them. And it's important to make the distinction between temptations and trials. So 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13 simply means that God won't allow us to be tempted to sin beyond what we can bear. But troubles and trials in life are a whole other thing. And you might be sitting there like, Curtis, you said this was good news. And this is not the type of message we typically preach. I rarely God's going to give you more than you can handle, good luck. That's not how I'm bent. So I'm going to, hopefully, you'll walk away a little bit more hopeful than you're sitting right now. And, you might doubt or deny what I'm saying, but listen, let's look at what the Apostle Paul ought to be a pretty good source of authority on this statement, because one, like, the dude endured more than any of us probably ever will or can imagine. He wrote the majority of the New Testament. He established the early church. He was in prison, beaten, writing letters of encouragement to the early church, and his writings have been poured over by scholars for generations and generations and generations. So if I'm not a good dependable source, let's say that he is. And let's consider the subject here and start looking at three truths that will put this cow down, okay? One is the burden of unbearable pressure. Good. The burden. There are things, here's the truth, there are things that are going to come against you that are going to be too much for you. Not temptation, but trials and things in life that are going to come against you that will be too much for you to handle. 2 Corinthians 1:8 says this. Paul wrote this. For we do not want you to be unaware, brethren, of our affliction which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened excessively beyond our strength, so that we even despaired of life. So he was on a missionary journey. He was doing God's work. He was doing what he was called to do, and suddenly things came upon him. And this is how he described it. Burdened excessively, beyond our strength, despaired even of life. So they were sitting there thinking, life is terrible. I just want it over because everything is so bad. And he says at the beginning, and this is what's cool, he says, for we do not want you to be unaware. He wanted people to know. This is what happens. This is part of the cost of maturing in your identity in Christ, is that things are going to come against you, burdens of unbearable pressure, things that you can't overcome on your own. And I'm reading that, and I'm thinking, God, I thought you were nice. I thought you were a nice daddy. Like my girls tell me sometimes, you're a mean dad. Sometimes I am a mean dad, okay? But my God is always good. So why? Well, 2, there are benefits of unbearable pressure. Amen. 2 Corinthians 1:9. We just read 2 Corinthians 1:8. Now read 2 Corinthians 1:9. He says, indeed, we had the sentence of death with ourselves, so that we would not trust in ourselves, excuse me, but in God who raises the dead. So what he's saying is, it didn't matter how we felt, because we had to remove our trust from ourselves and place it in God, who, he gives an example, does something impossible. He can do anything. Even if we're killed, he's saying, I've got a God who can raise me if he wants to. Amen. Even if it's the worst possible thing imaginable, my God can take care of me. Amen. And he says, so that we would not trust in ourselves, but in God. So why the pressure? So that we learn to go against what is natural and push towards what is supernatural. I may not be the world's worst, but I got to be like a close second of trying to push into the supernatural by the natural. Trying to just make it happen. Trying to push into it, push it forward. Why can't this church grow? Why do my finances look this bad? Why are my kids acting crazy? Trying to use the natural to push into the supernatural when it's really supposed to be the other way around. I'm supposed to live supernatural in this place. Mm-hmm. And every step that I take, that's a supernatural step. And my general circle of influence is suddenly a supernatural place because of who I am in him. So we learn to go against what is natural and push towards what is supernatural, because natural says, I'm going to trust in me, and supernatural says, I'm going to trust in him. You might be sitting there thinking like, this don't seem super deep. Listen, it's not that deep. But I promise you, this week, you're going to be challenged on this. Whether or not you're going to rely on the natural or the supernatural, my hope is you will say, I'm going to go supernatural this time. I'm going to see what happens. Listen, because you can live life apart from God. You know that? I've got friends who live very successful lives apart from God. But it's still a lesser life. On the outset, everything looks great, but when I speak to them, I realize it is still a lesser life. It's crazy, it's sad that they think they have it all together, but it's still a lesser life. And when I talk to them, all I say is, you know what? All I can say is that you've got that, but as for me and my house, we're going to live a better life. Okay? So there's a burden and there's a benefit. A burden, and worship team, can I go make your way back up? There's a burden and there's a benefit. 2 Corinthians 12:7-10 says this, that there's a breakthrough in unbearable pressure. Because, I'm going to read it through and then I'm going to go back through. Because of the extravagance of those revelations, this is the Apostle Paul speaking again. Because of the extravagance of those revelations, and so I wouldn't get a big head, I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Y'all guys, go ahead whenever you're ready. Satan's angel did his best to get me down. What he in fact did was push me to my knees. And there's no danger then of walking around high and mighty. At first, I didn't think of it as a gift, and I begged God to remove it. 3 times I did that, and then he told me, my grace is enough, it's all you need. My strength comes to its own in your weakness. Once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap, and I began appreciating the gift. It was a case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness. And now I take limitations in stride and with good cheer. These limitations that cut me down to size, abuse, accidents, opposition, bad breaks, etc., I just let Christ take over. And so the weaker I get, the stronger I become. Y'all, that's good. So I'm going to read it to you again. I'm going to stop and pause, and I'm going to give you Curtis Ribble commentary real quick. Because of the extravagance of those revelations, what revelation? Anything of God. Anything of the gospel. And so I wouldn't get a big head. I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Whose limitations? Mine. Not God's. He needs to remind me of me, okay? Satan's angel did his best to get me down. And what he in fact did was push me to my knees. It's like, hit me with your best shots. It's going to take me right where I need to be anyway. Sometimes, I don't really know that I should say it. I'm about to say that in a minute. I ain't going to say it now. But he pushes us. It's funny that the enemy thinks that, like, man, I got you with the left, I got you with the right, you're falling down, and suddenly you're right where you need to be. Because it says there's no danger of walking around high and mighty. That's powerful, guys. Whenever my posture changes, my perspective changes. Whenever my posture is different, I see more clearly. At first, I didn't think of it as a gift, and I begged God to remove it. 3 times I did that, and he told me, my grace is enough, it's all you need. I don't know if Paul's talking about literally 3 times he asked, but in the Bible, oftentimes, the numbers 3 and 7 represent a completion. So what I kind of think is, either way, it doesn't matter, but reading this, I see, like, he prayed until he felt completion. Like, I can't pray anymore about this. It's almost as if the Apostle Paul was dealing with something that we deal with today so often. God, why ain't you doing what I'm asking you to do? I've prayed so much. And finally, he came to his senses, or he opened his ears and he heard clearly and truly, my grace is sufficient for you. My grace is enough. And then God said, my strength comes into its own in your weakness. What is God saying? He said, when you are weak, my strength shows through. When you are at your weakest, when you are at your lessest, when you are down and low, my strength shows through. Okay? And once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. Because he's bigger than me. My God's got muscles this big. He's a big God. Okay? And it says, this is where it gets key. I quit focusing on the handicap and I began appreciating the gift. Bible says, do not be conformed to this world. This has been the verse that I've talked about for a year. But be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and perfect will of God. Only someone who has a renewed mind will look at something that appears to be a handicap and says, I'm thankful for this gift. So he says, I quit focusing on the handicap and I began appreciating the gift. Then he says, and it was a case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness. And now, I love it, it's affirmative. It says, now. That means now I'm never going back. Now, forevermore, I take my limitations in stride and with good cheer. A smile on my face when I look stupid because the world is saying, how's he doing it? And all I can say is, Jesus. He says, I take limitations in stride and with good cheer. And these limitations that cut me down to size, these abuse, these accidents, this opposition, these bad breaks, whatever, you fill in the blank. What limitation do you see in your life that you have not let Christ take over? He says right here, I just let Christ take over. So the weaker I get, the stronger I become. Guys, your strengths are strengths. And your weaknesses make you stronger. I know that's like 2 + 2 = artichoke. Okay? But that's the gospel. It doesn't make sense, but it is true. And it doesn't make sense unless I'm operating with that renewed mind. Why am I talking about a renewed mind so much? Because it's so easy for that renewed mind to become unrenewed. Every single morning I have to wake up and decide I'm going to allow myself to operate in a renewed mind so that I can see the supernatural at work within the natural. But what did Paul have to do? He said this, I quit focusing on the handicap and I began appreciating the gift. And I asked myself last night as I was finishing it, because I thought he was talking about appreciating the gift, the handicap that had been given to him. And he may have. I'm not saying he wasn't at all. But as I look through his life and I look through what he's saying and how he's ending this writing, as he's talking about Christ's strength moving in on weakness and taking limitations in stride, and allowing Christ to take over, and saying that when I get weaker, he becomes stronger. Well, the gift that I think he's talking about is this. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have eternal life. Suddenly, in this moment, Paul is writing about grace. And he says, I have a new appreciation for grace. I have a new appreciation for the gift of cross. And my focus doesn't have to be on my weakness, my limitation, the fact that I can't live an abundant life on my own. But my focus can now be on my life with Jesus, which is this, Jesus plus nothing. Jesus plus nothing. Here, I'm gonna kind of close with this. We're going to end the time of worship. I want to pray with some people. But I was, last Sunday, if you didn't know, we're going to have a baby in about 2 months, a baby boy, Cooper Dean Ribble, and I'm so excited. Yeah. But, you know, we're hippies, you know, we ain't doing a hospital birth, you know, we're going to a birthing center, and it's different. I ain't gonna lie, it's different. It creeps me out a little bit, okay? And I'm not uber mature when it comes to stuff like this in my life. And so after church on Sunday, we went out. My mother-in-law Chris was shaking her hand. He is not, and it is true. And then we left church Sunday and we drove to Fort Worth to go to a birthing class. Anybody ever sat through a birthing class? See, I knew I was the only white person here. Like, I felt like this is the whitest thing I've ever been to. And I was sitting there, and they were talking, and it was funny. You know, we watched this video, and the lady's like, well, what did you like about this video? And there's 20 people in the room, and nobody's being honest. And I said, nothing. Nothing. I like nothing about that video. That's the worst thing I've ever seen, ever. I cannot believe you showed me that. Anyways, we went to the class, and we had a good time, and it was late, it was like 10:30. And I tell you all that, that's free. That means nothing to where I'm going. Other than that, I had to give you some setting. And we stayed the night, and the next morning we're coming back home, and we stop at this like random like bakery coffee shop thing, and it got really cold from Sunday to Monday, and I had like shorts and t-shirts, and this guy, I'm getting some coffee, and he goes, man, are you not freezing? And I said, you know what, I kind of am. And he goes, what do you do? And I said, well, I pastor a church there in Graham, you know. He goes, oh, I know Graham. I didn't know there was any saved people in Graham. And I said, well, we're working on it, you know. And he said, I got a question. I said, yeah. And he goes, do you preach for Jesus or against sin? You know, that's like a trap question. That's like one time I sat down with somebody at Mi Familia, and it was somebody who was kind of looking into the church, and they asked to have a meeting, and we sat down, and oh no, they were wanting to give money to the church. That's what it was. When we were first getting started, we sat down, and they bring the chips and sauce, and he looked at me and said, Pastor, do you pray over chips and sauce? I didn't know what to say. I was like, this is one of those moments where I'm going to say the wrong thing. And I said, I don't pray for anything that costs less than $2.50. And he said, that's a good answer, right? So I was sitting there, and he asked me that, and I said, it's always Jesus. And he said, that's a good answer. And we got to talking, and you know, I felt like after I left that birthday class, like I was supposed to be like more confident. No. I walked in cold sweats thinking, God, what do we do? We don't know what we don't have a clue, and we're nervous, and I'm with Jessie, and she's a little scared. I'm like, it's good, baby, you got this. I went back to my training. You are beautiful. You are so strong, because they made us do this thing where I had to say encouraging words to my wife. It was weird. Because I do that anyway. But he's sitting there, and he said, you preach for Jesus or against sin? And I said, it's always Jesus. He said, that's a good answer. I don't know what to do. It's always Jesus. I need promotion in my life. It's Jesus. Go to him. Don't call me. I want to know. But I shouldn't be your first call. All right, I should be like number 2. Call Jesus. Get on the horn with him. He's got better wisdom than I do. Anyways, these two guys, they don't know like how nervous I am. Baby number 3, right? You ain't supposed to be nervous anymore. They just fall out. But I was still nervous. Okay? And I'm just nervous. And he goes, hey, you know, I'm such and such. I'm from Gateway Church. You wanna come and pray with our table? And I was like, I really don't want to pray with your table. Like, I don't want to pray. And he goes, oh, I mean, we want to pray with you. And I'm like, I can do that. Like, I can do that right now. I'm thinking, like, I want to pray with your table. It's cold out. I'm hungry. I'm trying to get my breakfast, bro. He's like, we want to pray with you. And they brought me over there in the middle of this bakery, and they prayed for me. And suddenly, I remembered that if I quit focusing on the thing that is making me feel the weakest, and I focus on the gift, when I am weak, he is strong. And my weakness becomes a strength. And I walked out of that place stronger than I walked in. Not because of the coffee, because of the Jesus. I don't know what you're dealing with. I don't know what weakness you would say like you have right now. Stand with me. But it's finished. It's Jesus plus nothing. And here in a minute, the team's going to lead in worship. And I want to stand right there. But if you think, I need somebody to partner with me today, like I need some of that. I need to walk out of this place stronger than I came in. Come see me. I want to pray with you. I want to hold hands with you. And I want to lift you up. Okay? We're going to talk to God together. All right. It's always Jesus. I'm going to pray. The team's going to lead us. I'm going to step right over there. Come see me. Father, we thank you that you are more. We thank you that what you did is done. That it is finished. And that when we are weak, you are strong. God, we thank you that we are stronger because of you. God, I ask that you would move mightily in this time of worship as we close.
You are an awesome